The sleek black limousine rolled slowly down the cracked main road, its tinted windows reflecting the faded shopfronts and rusting street signs of a town that time had nearly forgotten. Behind the glass sat Alexander Crane, billionaire investor, industrial magnate, and the son of a woman who once sold pies on these very streets to keep him fed. 15 years had passed since he last set foot here. The world saw him as untouchable now. Forbes covers, headlines, boardrooms, but his heart clenched as he gazed out at the peeling paint and sagging porches of a place that had shaped him with equal parts cruelty and resilience. He tapped his fingers on the leather seat, his face unreadable, but his chest tight with memories that refused to stay buried. The car slowed near the old train station, where as a boy he used to dream of hopping the rails and disappearing to somewhere better. Instead, life had thrown him a different escape. Scholarships, business ventures, ruthless deals, and finally a fortune so vast it seemed unreal even to him. Yet as the driver opened his door, the first sound he heard wasn't applause or cheer but silence. A cluster of townsfolk had gathered, their eyes wide, their whispers thick in the still air. That can't be Alex Crane. 15 years, thought he was never coming back. Look at the car, look at the suit, my God. Alexander stepped out, his tailored navy suit catching the morning sun, his polished shoes too sharp for the dusty gravel underfoot. He lifted his chin, scanning the familiar faces, wrinkled with age, hardened with years, but instantly recognizable. Mrs. Holloway, who used to shoo him from her bakery steps when he had no coins. Tom Briggs, the mechanic's son who once shoved him into the mud for wearing second-hand sneakers. Even Mr. Dyer, the town's banker, the man who had sneered at his mother when she begged for an extension on their rent. Their eyes darted between awe, suspicion, and shame. "Welcome back, Mr. Crane," the mayor finally said, forcing a smile as he stepped forward. The man's suit was outdated, the tie crooked, but his handshake was firm. "We weren't expecting you." "I didn't come to be expected," Alexander replied smoothly, though his tone carried an edge that made the mayor shift uncomfortably. "I came because some debts are never paid until you return." His words lingered, cryptic enough to unsettle, clear enough to silence further greetings. He walked past them, every step purposeful, his entourage following at a respectful distance. The murmurs rose again behind him. Some admired his success, some bristled at his arrogance, and others simply stared, trying to reconcile the billionaire before them with the boy they had once dismissed as worthless. The town hadn't changed much, he noticed as he made his way down Main Street. The hardware store still stood where his mother once bought him nails for a homemade bike. The school playground was visible in the distance, swings rusting, chains squeaking faintly in the breeze. He remembered sitting there, bruised and angry, vowing that one day he'd leave and never look back. Now here he was, standing tall, powerful beyond what any of them could have imagined, but feeling that same bruised boy stirring inside him. "Alex," a voice called softly from the sidewalk. He turned and saw Mrs. Carter, his old teacher, her hair whiter but her smile unchanged. She clutched her books against her chest, her eyes shining. "You really came back?" He inclined his head. "I did. For good?" she asked, her tone a blend of hope and disbelief. His gaze swept across the faces, the broken windows, the weary streets. "That depends," he said. "Sometimes you have to come home to see what's worth staying for." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken history. For Alexander, the journey was no longer about flaunting wealth or proving his rise, it was about confronting everything he'd run from. The town had shaped him, scarred him, and now, as he stood beneath the same cracked lampposts, he knew this return was the beginning of a reckoning that neither he nor the town was prepared for. The following morning, Alexander rose early in the guest suite of the only hotel in town, a building that had once been a proud landmark but now smelled faintly of mildew and neglect. He had barely slept, his mind replaying the fragments of conversations and glances from the night before. The weight of the past clung to him like smoke. He ordered no breakfast, only black coffee, and stood by the window watching the gray sky overcast the rooftops of the town he both loathed and longed to save. At 7 sharp, he instructed his driver to take him through the streets, not to the mayor's office or the country club, but to the places no visitor ever went. As the limousine rolled past shuttered shops and graffiti-stained walls, Alexander's jaw tightened. Once, this town had thrived on its factories and farms. Now, it looked hollowed out, like a carcass picked clean. He remembered how it used to hum with life, families pouring out of the factory gates at dusk, children laughing in the park. That factory had been the heartbeat of the town, employing hundreds, including his mother for years until her back gave out. But when he asked the driver to stop at the factory gates, all he found were rusting fences, broken windows, and a "for sale" sign bleached by the sun. He stepped out, ignoring the dust that clung to his suit shoes. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant cry of a crow. He walked toward the gate, running his hand across the cold, corroded metal. A flood of memories surged. His mother coming home late, her hands blistered but her smile determined, her whispered promise that she was doing it all for him. He blinked hard and turned away, only to see a figure watching him from the street. It was Tom Briggs, the same Tom who had once bloodied his nose behind the school. Time had not been kind to him. His belly hung over his belt, his eyes were tired, and the swagger of youth had dissolved into bitterness. He squinted at Alexander with a mixture of recognition and envy. "Didn't think I'd ever see you standing here again," Tom said, his voice gravelly. "Guess money makes men forget their promises." Alexander's gaze was cool. "What promise?" "That you'd never come back," Tom spat, kicking at a stone. "Thought you were too good for us. Guess you just came to see what's left of the scraps." Alexander studied him for a long moment. "I came to see the truth. And it looks worse than I imagined." Tom's laugh was hollow. "That factory closed down 6 years ago. Not 'cause of bad business like they told us. No, 'cause old Mr. Dyer, your mother's landlord, remember him? He bought the land cheap, stripped what he could, and left the rest to rot. Half the town lost their jobs overnight. People begged, but he tightened his grip, bought up debts, made himself king of this wreck." The words hit Alexander like a blade twisting. He remembered the sneer on Dyer's face the day he'd thrown his mother out for being late with rent. To think that same man now controlled the fates of so many was unbearable. "Why hasn't anyone stopped him?" Alexander asked, his voice sharp. Tom shrugged, bitterness clouding his features. "Because no one's got the power. He's got the money, the law in his pocket, and the people by their throats. And you," Tom's eyes narrowed. "You're not here to save anyone. You're here to soothe your conscience." The accusation stung, but Alexander said nothing. He simply turned, climbing back into the limousine. Tom's mocking laugh echoed after him, but it only strengthened the steel in Alexander's resolve. As the car drove on, Alexander asked the driver to take him past the town square. What he saw made his stomach knot tighter. Families lined up outside the food pantry. Men stood idle near the closed mill, their hands shoved deep in their pockets, eyes dull. Children played barefoot on cracked sidewalks. It was a portrait of despair, painted over the backdrop of his childhood. When the limousine slowed near the park, Alexander caught sight of her. His breath stopped. Clara, his first love. She stood near the swings, her hair tied back, her shoulders slightly hunched. A child clung to her skirt, another played close by. She looked older, tired, but her eyes still carried the softness he remembered. For a fleeting moment, he imagined walking over, hearing her say his name like she once did. But then, a tall man approached her, placing a possessive hand on her shoulder. Her husband. The car rolled on, and Alexander forced himself to look away, but the image seared into him. Everything had changed, yet nothing had changed. The town was still shackled, and so was he, by memory, by unfinished battles, by a vow to himself he could no longer ignore. This was no casual visit, no sentimental trip. This was a reckoning. He had left as a boy with nothing. Now he had returned as a man with power. And if the town was drowning under the weight of one man's greed, then Alexander Crane would be the storm that broke those chains. Alexander stood at the wide oak doors of the town hall, his reflection caught in the dusty glass. The building, once a symbol of civic pride, looked tired, paint flaking, shutters sagging, the brass handles dulled by years of neglect. Inside, murmurs of voices rose like a low tide. He knew who he would find. The mayor, the council, and most of all, Leonard Dyer, the man who had haunted his memories and now, apparently, ruled the town with a grip of iron. When he entered, the chatter stilled. Heads turned. Men and women who had laughed at his boyhood poverty now sat rigid in their chairs, their expressions caught between curiosity and fear. At the far end of the table, leaning back with smug ease, sat Dyer. Time had not withered him. His hair was thinner, his waistline heavier, but the same sly confidence glittered in his eyes. He tapped a gold ring against the table, a rhythmic reminder of his power. Well, Dyer drawled, his lips curling. If it isn't little Alex Crane. Or should I say, Alexander the Great. The prodigal son returns. His laugh spread across the room, cold and calculated. Alexander met his gaze without blinking. I didn't come back for pleasantries. No, I expect not, Dyer said, rising with the deliberate slowness of a man who enjoyed being watched. Word is you've been sniffing around the factory. Stirring up old ghosts, asking questions. Dangerous hobby, poking into business that isn't yours. Alexander stepped forward, his voice carrying across the chamber. That factory wasn't just a business. It was this town's backbone. Hundreds of families depended on it, including mine. And you gutted it for profit, left everyone to starve. Gasps rippled through the room. The mayor shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Alexander's stare. Dyer's grin only widened. "Ah," Dyer said softly, almost kindly, still carrying that chip on your shoulder. "Listen, boy, it wasn't personal. Just business. Those who adapt survive. Those who don't, well, they shouldn't get in the way of progress." Progress. Alexander snapped, his composure slipping. "Look outside. Look at the hunger, the poverty, the despair. That isn't progress, that's your empire of ruin." For the first time, Dyer's smile faltered, though only slightly. "You speak like you care. Yet you left, didn't you? 15 years gone. Left your mother to fend for herself until she died in that cramped apartment. Left the girl you claimed to love. Left the whole damn town. You think money makes you a savior now?" The words cut deep. For a moment, Alexander's chest tightened, his fists clenched. But then he straightened, letting the anger sharpen into resolve. "Yes, I left. And I built something from nothing. You used power to destroy. I used it to create. And now, I'm here to put right what you broke." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. Whispers rose again. Some nodded faintly, their faces lined with years of hardship. Others shrank back, unwilling to risk Dyer's wrath. Dyer leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "And how do you plan to do that? Buy your way to sainthood? Throw your money around and expect the world to kneel? You forget, Crane, I own this town. Its land, its debts, even its lawmen. You don't scare me." Alexander let a slow, measured smile cross his face. "I'm not here to scare you, Dyer. I'm here to end you." The silence was electric. Dyer's fists curled, but Alexander turned deliberately, addressing the room. "To every family drowning in debt, every worker stripped of dignity, every child growing up without hope, you have been prisoners of one man's greed. That ends today. I'm buying back the factory. I'll restore it, rehire workers, and rebuild this town's heart. No one will answer to Dyer again." The mayor sputtered, "You can't just." "I can," Alexander cut in, his voice like steel. "And I will, because I didn't come back for nostalgia. I came back for justice." The room erupted in a storm of voices, some hopeful, others fearful. Dyer stood rigid, his jaw tight, his eyes blazing with a hatred that promised retaliation. But Alexander didn't flinch. He turned and walked out, his footsteps echoing against the hollow walls. Outside, the townspeople had gathered, drawn by rumor. When Alexander emerged, their eyes clung to him, wary, searching, desperate for a reason to believe. He met their gaze, not with arrogance but with resolve. "Change is coming," he said simply. And for the first time in years, a murmur of hope stirred through the crowd. The showdown came on a Friday evening, when the town hall lights burned long after sunset. Word had spread faster than wildfire. Alexander Crane was calling a public meeting, and for the first time in years, Leonard Dyer had agreed to show his face before the people. The square outside the building overflowed with townsfolk, their voices hushed, their breath visible in the cooling night. Some clutched their children close, others folded their arms against their chests as if guarding against disappointment. They had been deceived before, but something about Alexander's return had sparked a fragile ember of hope. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Rows of worn wooden chairs creaked as people leaned forward, eyes darting between the two men who now stood at opposite ends of the chamber. Dyer looked like a lion cornered, his tailored suit too tight around his midsection, sweat gleaming at his brow despite the cool air. Alexander, by contrast, was calm, a quiet storm contained within his tall frame. He had shed the arrogance of his arrival. Tonight, he spoke not as a billionaire, but as a son of the soil. 15 years ago, Alexander began, his voice steady, carrying across the room without need of a microphone. "I left this town with nothing but hunger in my belly and a promise to myself, that if I ever found a way back, I would not come empty-handed. I built a life, I built an empire, but none of it erases where I came from, or what was taken from all of you." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. He let the words hang for a moment before continuing. "This man," he gestured to Dyer, "profited from your despair. He bought your debts, closed your livelihoods, and made himself master while you struggled to survive. That ends tonight. Dyer laughed harshly, the sound grating against the charged silence. Big words from a boy who ran away. You think money fixes everything? These people know who's fed them for years. Without me, this town collapses. No, Alexander said firmly, without you, this town breathes again. At his signal, 2 assistants wheeled in large boards covered with documents, legal filings, deeds, contracts. Gasps filled the room as Alexander pulled back the covers. Every property you seized, every debt you leveraged, every factory asset you gutted, I've acquired them. Legally, permanently. As of this morning, Leonard Dyer owns nothing of this town. The crowd erupted, a thunderous wave of disbelief and joy colliding in the air. Dyer's face turned a dangerous shade of red as he lunged forward, slamming his fist on the table. You think you can steal my legacy? He roared. Alexander's gaze didn't waver. You never built a legacy. You fed on fear. I've built opportunity. Starting next month, the factory reopens under fair wages and honest work. Every family will have a chance to stand tall again. A cheer broke out, tentative at first, then swelling until it shook the rafters. Women wept openly, men clasped each other's shoulders, children clapped though they didn't fully understand. For the first time in years, the town felt alive. Dyer tried to shout above the noise, but his voice was drowned. His power was gone, stripped not by force but by the same law he had once twisted for his own gain. He slumped into his chair, a man unmade. Alexander let the cheering fade before raising a hand. I don't ask for gratitude, he said. All I ask is that you believe in yourselves again. This isn't about me, it's about all of you. This town can thrive, but only if we rebuild it together. In the front row, Alexander caught sight of Clara. She stood with her children, her eyes glistening. For a moment, their gazes locked, no words spoken, just a silent acknowledgement of what had been lost and what might yet be healed. She offered him a small, weary smile, and he returned it, though his heart ached. Some wounds were too deep to undo. When the meeting ended, people spilled into the square, their voices no longer whispers of despair but laughter, chatter, plans for tomorrow. Alexander stepped outside into the crisp night air, inhaling deeply. The town no longer felt like a cage. It felt like a beginning. Behind him, Dyer slipped away into the shadows, a relic of an age that had finally collapsed. Alexander didn't watch him go. He looked instead at the people gathering in clusters, already speaking of repairs, of new opportunities, of life stirring once more. He had come home not for revenge, but for redemption. And in giving the town its future back, he had found his own place again, not as the billionaire outsider, but as the boy who had once dreamed beneath these very stars, finally returning to keep his promise.